The dark surface of Enceladus stretched out, broken only by columns of vapor erupting from fissures in the icy crust, quietly dissolving into the void of space. The Perseus 9 silently glided through the moon's shadowy region, its solar panels trembling ever so slightly as the craft adjusted its orbit. From Earth, no one knew that something was watching them. Inside the research bay, the bioanalysis system began scanning the water samples collected from Enceladus's hidden ocean. The data sent back to NASA revealed the presence of a complex organic compound, but what left the research team dumbfounded was that it did not match any molecular chain ever recorded before. A faint, almost imperceptible signal flickered within the data stream, barely noticeable by anyone. Upon the spacecraft's return, the specimen was immediately transferred to a top-secret laboratory. The room's temperature was lowered to minimum 180 degrees Celsius, replicating the conditions on Enceladus. No one suspected that beneath that frozen exterior, something was still alive. 3 days later, during a night shift, a technician inspected the pressure within the containment chamber. In the dim light, he noticed something moving within the ice. It was impossible. The specimen should have been completely frozen. But as he leaned in for a closer look, he saw that the ice was no longer intact as before. It was cracking from within. A faint, crackling sound echoed, so subtle that he almost convinced himself it was a figment of his imagination. Then a small fissure began to spread slowly across the surface of the ice, emitting an eerie glow. The technician hurriedly rechecked the room's temperature. Everything remained stable. There was no sign of melting. So, what was happening? Before he could react, the display screen started outputting a cascade of jumbled characters. The graphs fluctuated wildly, and then, suddenly, a block of text appeared on the screen, clear and unmistakable, written in a language not of human origin. He recoiled, his heart pounding furiously. The chamber door trembled slightly, and from within, something was gradually awakening. A heavy silence filled the lab. The technician's breath came in short, ragged gasps as he fumbled for his flashlight. His fingers were numb, whether from the cold or fear, he couldn't tell. Then, a sound. A soft, deliberate step on the metal floor. He flicked the flashlight on. The beam cut through the darkness, trembling as his hands shook. Something was standing there. It was humanoid, tall, impossibly slender, its form shifting like liquid shadow. Its surface wasn't skin, but something else entirely, something that shimmered and pulsed as if the universe itself was woven into its being. The orbs that resembled eyes studied him, not with hostility, but with curiosity. Your world is loud, the voice spoke inside his mind again, layered with tones he couldn't begin to comprehend. The technician swallowed hard, his mind racing. His training had never prepared him for this. I don't understand, he stammered, stepping back. You called us. The voice repeated, more insistent this time. I didn't call anything, the technician managed. We were studying. A silence stretched between them, heavy and unnatural. Then the being shifted, its form flickering, momentarily vanishing before reappearing closer. Ignorance does not absolve responsibility, it said. The technician's blood ran cold. He reached for the emergency alarm, but before he could press it, the being raised a hand, if it could be called that. A pulse of unseen energy rippled through the air, and suddenly, the technician couldn't move. Not paralyzed, not restrained, just disconnected. His thoughts were still there. His fear still burned in his chest, but his body no longer responded to his will. The being tilted its head, as if considering something. Then, in a voice that sent ice through his veins, it spoke again. You are not the first. The lights flickered once, twice, and then everything went black. A low hum filled the lab, barely audible but deep enough to vibrate through the technician's chest. The screen flickered, lines of alien symbols scrolling rapidly before abruptly stopping. Then, a single word appeared. Clear, deliberate, as if it had been waiting for someone to see it. Awake. The technician's breath caught in his throat. His fingers hovered over the emergency lockdown panel, but hesitation froze him in place. The ice inside the containment unit was shifting, not melting, but restructuring. Thin, vein-like fractures spread outward in an almost organic pattern, pulsing with a faint bluish glow. Then, the ice cracked. Not a slow fracture, but an instantaneous rupture, like something had forced its way through from the inside. The chamber door rattled violently. The technician stumbled backward, reaching for his radio. Security we have. Before he could finish, the overhead lights flickered, casting erratic shadows across the lab. The temperature display on the wall fluctuated wildly, first dropping to near absolute zero, then spiking upward. Equipment short-circuited, the room filled with static, and the air became heavy, charged with something unseen. Then movement. The technician's eyes darted back to the chamber. Through the frost-covered glass, a shape, indistinct, shifting. It was no longer just ice. It was something more, something fluid. And then eyes, not human, not like anything he had ever seen. They weren't eyes in the traditional sense, but void-like orbs that shimmered with depth like staring into the cosmos itself. They locked onto him. A voice, except it wasn't a voice. It was inside his head, layered, alien, speaking without sound. You have called us. The technician stumbled back, his mind reeling. He hadn't called anything. No one had. The ice around the figure shattered, shards floating unnaturally in the air before dissolving into nothingness. Then the lights cut out completely. And in the dark, something stepped forward. The darkness swallowed everything. For a moment, there was nothing. No sound, no movement, just an empty void where time seemed to stretch endlessly. Then light. Not from the overhead fixtures. Not from his flashlight, which had slipped from his fingers and now lay useless on the floor. This light was different, pulsing, shifting, coming from the being itself. It radiated in waves, illuminating the lab in an eerie, otherworldly glow. The technician's body remained frozen, but his mind raced. He could still feel his heartbeat pounding in his chest, the cold sweat running down his back. The being took another step forward, its form flickering between solid and translucent, as though it existed in two places at once. We have watched. The words weren't spoken. They bloomed in his mind, layered and alien, carrying an unfathomable weight. We have waited. Waited? Waited for what? His lips moved, but no sound came out. His body refused to obey. The being lifted its hand again, long, delicate fingers shifting like tendrils of smoke. A wave of energy pulsed through the room, and suddenly the technician felt something. Not pain, not fear, a memory. But it wasn't his. Images flashed through his mind, an ocean, dark and endless, stretching beneath an icy shell. Shapes moving in the depths too large, too alien to comprehend. A network of intelligence, not separate entities, but a collective consciousness that had existed for longer than human history. And then, Tridut, the image of his own planet seen from space, growing larger as if something was approaching. You are not the first, the being repeated, and this time he understood. Enceladus wasn't just a moon, it was a cradle, a waiting place. And something had been waiting for far too long. The technician's vision blurred, his mind buckling under the weight of what he had just seen. Then, for the first time since it awoke, the being moved closer, so close he could see the shifting galaxies reflected in its void-like eyes. They are coming. The lights flickered once, twice, and then everything shattered. The fall felt endless. He wasn't dropping through space. He wasn't plunging through the void. He was being pulled, dragged downward by something unseen, something vast and relentless. The stars above twisted, spiraling into impossible shapes, warping as if the universe itself was bending around him. And then, impact. His back slammed against cold metal. The breath was knocked from his lungs. He gasped, eyes flying open. He was back. The lab ceiling loomed above him, the dim emergency lights flickering erratically. The hum of machinery buzzed in his ears. Everything looked the same, but something was wrong. He pushed himself up, his limbs trembling. His console was still active, its screen glowing in the darkness. But the data, it had changed. The symbols, the alien text, were gone. In their place was a single message written in perfect English. They are already here. His breath hitched. A metallic creak echoed through the room. Slowly, he turned his head toward the containment chamber. The glass was shattered, the ice was gone, and the thing that had been inside wasn't there anymore. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead. He scrambled backward, his mind screaming at him to run, to sound the alarm, to do anything. But his body locked up as he caught sight of something moving in the corner of the lab. A shadow. No, not a shadow. A figure. Tall. Wrong. Its form flickered, shifting like it was struggling to stay in one reality. It turned toward him. And then, in a voice that did not belong to this world, it spoke. We never left. The lab plunged into darkness. The darkness pressed in like a living thing. The technician's breath came in ragged gasps as he scrambled backward, his hands searching for something, anything, to anchor himself to reality. But the lab was gone. Or rather, it had changed. The walls pulsed, the air shimmered, the hum of machinery had been replaced by something deeper, something that resonated in his bones. The figure was still there, watching. It didn't move like a person. It didn't breathe. It simply existed, shifting between states, as if it wasn't entirely bound to this dimension. Then it took a step forward. The shadows behind it twisted, stretching unnaturally across the floor. The technician tried to run, but his legs refused to obey. He felt like a puppet whose strings had been cut, still upright, still aware, but powerless. You opened the door. The words weren't spoken. They were implanted, threading through his thoughts like invasive roots. The technician's mind reeled. No, he gasped. We didn't know. The figure tilted its head. Irrelevant. Another step. The temperature in the room dropped sharply, frost creeping along the shattered containment glass. The technician forced his body to move, inching toward the emergency alarm. If he could just reach it. The lights flickered violently, and then, for a split second, the shadows parted. Behind the figure, he saw them. Dozens of them. Standing in the shifting dark, their bodies barely distinguishable from the void itself. Watching. Waiting. His fingers brushed the alarm switch. A hand, cold and weightless, closed around his wrist. He looked up. The figure's void-like eyes reflected something. Not him. Not the lab. But the stars. You will carry the message. A sound low and reverberating filled the air. The technician screamed, and the universe swallowed him whole. Silence. Cold. Then awareness. The technician's eyes snapped open. He was somewhere. Not the lab. Not Earth. The air, if it was even air, was thick, humming with an unseen energy. The sky above was black, not with the absence of light, but with something deeper. It was space, but alive. It pulsed, shifted, stretched endlessly. He tried to move. His body felt weightless, yet impossibly heavy at the same time. Then he heard them. Whispers. Not voices, not in any language he knew, but they resonated in his skull like vibrations through glass. He turned, and the figures were there, tall, shifting, flickering like half-formed thoughts on the edge of perception. One of them stepped forward. You are awake. His mind screamed for answers, for explanations. But the words died before they could form. He wasn't in control anymore. Images surged into his mind, the deep oceans of Enceladus, something stirring beneath, the ice fracturing, opening. The whispers intensified. They weren't just speaking to him, they were showing him. Planets, countless planets, some barren, some teeming with life, all marked by the same presence, the same unseen force stretching through the universe. And then, Earth. The image was different this time, no longer distant, no longer just a point. It was closer, too close. A shape moved within the vision, above Earth. Something massive, something shifting just beyond human perception. His heart pounded as realization struck him like a hammer blow. The message wasn't a warning. It was a transmission. And Earth was no longer just an observer in the universe. It had been noticed. The technician gasped, his consciousness slipping, his mind fracturing under the weight of what he had seen. The figures moved closer. You will carry the truth. The darkness swallowed him again. The void pulled him under. He was falling, not through space, not through time, but through something deeper. A chasm of existence where reality itself unraveled and rewove around him. His thoughts weren't his own anymore. They stretched, spiraled, merged with something else. And then, impact. His body slammed onto something solid. Cold air rushed into his lungs, his vision a blur of harsh white light. He gasped, coughing, trembling as he pressed his palms against smooth metal. The floor. He was back. The lab was exactly as he had left it. Dim emergency lights flickering, the shattered containment glass glinting under their weak glow. But something was wrong. It was too quiet. The technician staggered to his feet, his head pounded, his skin tingled with an unnatural static charge. He turned, heart hammering. The console screen was still active. But now, the message had changed. They see you. A sharp breath hitched in his throat. His shaking hands reached for the terminal, but before he could touch it, a sound. Not loud, not sudden, but impossibly deep. A resonance that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. The lab flickered. For a split second, it wasn't the lab anymore. It was something else. A great expanse of shifting darkness. towers of impossible geometry stretching into infinity, a sky that wasn't a sky but a swirling abyss filled with them, watching, waiting. He staggered backward. The lab snapped back into place, but the resonance remained, a slow, steady pulse within his chest. He could feel them now, inside his mind, behind his thoughts. They had left something in him. He looked down at his hands, his skin, and he saw it. A shimmer, a ripple of something not human, threading beneath his flesh, pulsing like a distant star. His breath came in sharp gasps. His reflection in the broken glass stared back, but it was wrong. His eyes weren't just his anymore. They were looking through him, and then a whisper, soft, ancient, spoken in a voice that was now part of him. It begins. The whisper echoed through his skull, threading into his thoughts like roots burrowing into the earth. His body was his own, but his mind was no longer alone. He staggered back, nearly tripping over the shattered glass. His reflection flickered. One moment his own face, the next something else. A shadow of a form he could barely comprehend, something vast and distant, watching from behind his eyes. He clenched his fists. Get it out! Get it out! His breath came in sharp, ragged gasps as he reached for the emergency comm panel. He had to call someone, anyone. But when his fingers touched the interface, the screen glitched. A flicker. For a brief moment, the lab dissolved into something else again. Endless corridors of obsidian black metal, shifting walls covered in pulsing symbols. He could feel them pressing against reality, waiting to step through. Then the lab snapped back. But the words on the screen were different now. The signal is sent. His pulse pounded in his ears, his hands shook violently. He hadn't sent anything. Had he? No. No, it wasn't him. It was them. A deep hum filled the air, growing louder, vibrating through his ribs. The lights dimmed, flickered, then turned a sickly, unnatural hue. A presence filled the room. Not a figure, not something he could see, but it was there, a weight in the air, pressing down on his skin, his thoughts, his soul. He turned slowly. The shadows on the far wall began to move, not cast by anything, not reflections, but independent, crawling, stretching. Something was stepping through. His breath caught in his throat. A shape began to emerge, tall, impossible, formless, and yet defined. And then it spoke, not in words, not in sound, but in understanding. A single thought planted directly into the core of his being. Prepare. The word prepare was not just heard, it was felt. It burrowed into his mind, wrapping around his thoughts, warping the very fabric of what he understood as reality. He staggered, clutching his head, but there was no pain, only a growing, suffocating awareness. Something was coming. No, something was already here. The shadows on the wall pulsed, shifting like liquid, expanding outward. A form began to take shape, a towering silhouette, its edges flickering between dimensions, its presence warping the space around it. The technician wanted to run. Every fiber of his being screamed for escape, but his body refused to move because they were holding him in place. Not physically, not with hands, with will. The air vibrated, a low, droning hum seeped into his bones. And then the lights went out. Total darkness, not just the absence of light, the absence of everything. For a moment he thought he had ceased to exist. Then, not human, not belonging to any known species, dozens of them, hundreds, opening in the void, watching him. He was seen. A voice, not a voice, but a thought carved into his very essence, spoke again. The cycle repeats. Flashes of images flooded his mind, a civilization before humanity, their towers swallowed by time, their warnings ignored, their final scream lost in the void. And now, Earth. The signal had been sent. The response had arrived. His body trembled. He was no longer just a man. He was an anchor, a conduit, a bridge between what was and what was coming. He opened his mouth to scream, but the darkness swallowed it whole. The silence was absolute. No breath, no sound, no time. And then light, blinding, cold. The technician gasped as he found himself back. Not in the void, not in the endless dark, but in the lab. The flickering lights buzzed overhead. The shattered containment glass still glistened on the floor. Had it all been a vision? A hallucination? His fingers twitched. He was trembling. But something deep inside him knew. It had been real. He turned to the console, his heartbeat hammering in his chest. The screen was still active, the final message blinking in stark digital clarity. They are here. A chill slithered down his spine. He slowly looked up toward the security camera in the corner of the room. The red recording light was on, watching. His reflection in the monitor's glass shifted. For just a fraction of a second, something else stared back, a shape behind his eyes. His breath caught. This wasn't over. It had only begun. Somewhere beyond the sky, something ancient had turned its gaze toward Earth. The cycle had started again, and this time, there would be no warnings. Only silence before the storm. Before the arrival. The technician reached for the emergency broadcast switch, his fingers hovering over the controls. His voice, hoarse and shaking, whispered the only words that mattered. If you're seeing this, spread the message. Tell everyone, before it's too late. The screen flickered. Static filled the air. Transmission ended. Do you believe we are truly alone in the universe? Or has something been watching us all along? If you love mysterious and thrilling stories like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next one. Leave a comment below. What do you think happens next?